Hey again, my friends, and what we're going to talk about now is something called order of operations. And my guess is a lot of you are already familiar with order of operations, and this is really going to be a set of three different lessons. And what we're going to do is try to expand on order of operations, and working from kind of a two-step problems to like 4 and 5-step problems, just as we. So to help you get familiar with the order of operations, to see the problems, and we're just going to work over the next 2 or 3 lessons to kind of expand on all the things that we've talked about, and kind of work up to more complex problems. So just in case that you're not familiar with order of operations, all right, these are really just a blueprint of how we work through a problem that includes multiple operations. Now, so you may have heard of PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, all those kinds of things to discuss your order of operations. So the please or the parentheses really represents all grouping symbols. So the first thing we want to look for are grouping symbols. All right, and so the parentheses are just one part of grouping symbols. There's actually several others. You may see brackets, you may see absolute value bars. Okay, so all those kind of grouping symbols really are the first thing we want to look at. And what we want to do is look inside of those grouping symbols and see if there's anything we can do to simplify inside of those. The next piece of our order of operations would be exponents. All right, so if we have something raised to a power, all right, we want to take care of those. All right, then we look for multiplication and or division. Now it's important for you to understand that multiplication and division are what we call equivalent operations. All right, so if we have multiplication and division in the problem, we actually just work left to right with those. We don't jump and do all the multiplication and then come back and jump back and do all the division. All right, so since they're equivalent, we work left to right and we work whichever one of those operations comes first. And then hopefully we'll be able to see some of that in some of our examples. And then finally, we look at addition and or subtraction. Once again, those are equivalent operations. All right, so we don't jump around in the problem to go do all the addition first and then come back and do all the subtraction. All right, you just work left to right, all right, in that final step, and I just do whichever one of those operations comes first. All right, so when we work with equivalent operations, all right, just take your time, work left to right, don't jump around, and that's a very common mistake that we hope to avoid. All right, so now, a few tips to help you when you're working through the problems, okay? So don't try to do too many things at once. Don't try to do 2 or 3 operations at once, especially in the beginning till you get a hang of everything. Do one step, bring everything down, all right, and then just kind of progress through the problem. And what I'm going to suggest is that you work vertically, all right, so to kind of help you with your organization of the problem, because a lot of things that we will get in as you work, if you work them vertically, it really helps you kind of organize your problem, see everything clearly. And the last thing is that if we have double signs in a problem, all right, we may want to go ahead and rewrite the problem with only one sign, just so it's obvious which operation you have, and to help you work with your numbers in a little cleaner fashion. All right. So without any more tips, let's go ahead and jump into some examples here. All right, so let's look at our first problem here. All right, so notice as we look at 3 squared plus 8, and let me pull this up. We're going to start here. All right, hold on. There we go. All right, so notice there are no grouping symbols. All right, so then our next thing would be looking for exponents, and we have an exponent right here. So that's the first thing that we want to take care of. Now remember, 3 squared is really 3 times 3. Okay, and 3 times 3 is 9. So I'm just going to replace that with a 9, and notice I'm going to bring everything else down just like it looks. I only have one operation left, so I perform that operation. 9 plus 8 is 17. All right, now when I look at our second example here, all right, we can see that we do have parentheses, we do have a set of grouping symbols. Now, here's what I was talking about with that double sign, that we have a negative negative. And to make it just a little bit easier, what we want to do is let's go ahead and rewrite this problem with one sign. All right, so we have the 1, and then what we should know by now, and hopefully you're feeling pretty comfortable with it, that a negative times a negative is a positive number, all right, and then we just bring down the 8. So now we want to perform the operation within our grouping symbol, all right, which is addition. So I'm going to keep the 4 on the outside, so 1 plus 8 is 9, all right, and then I get 4 times 9, which is 36. Now, what I'm going to do now is also say, hey, all right, we've also talked about the distributive property. So could I have distributed here, all right, to get to the same answer? And the reality is, yeah. So you could have done 4 times 1. My pen's a little slow here. All right, so I'm kind of having some issues here with the software. Catch up a little bit here. All right, and then I could have done 4 times 8, and that would have been 32. And you can see now we get to one addition problem, which is 36. So it does say that we want to take care of our grouping symbols, but you can see that there is a little bit of variance in that depending on what's inside, and if you simplify down to one operation of addition or subtraction inside. All right, so there are kind of two paths to get to the same answer. All right, so let's move on here. Here we go. All right, let's look at a couple more examples. All right, so the first example here, 9 minus 12 plus 5. All right, is that what I was talking about earlier? We have subtraction and addition. Those are only two operations in the problem. They are equivalent operations. All right, so since they're equivalent, I just work left to right. So I'm actually going to do the subtraction first. So I would do 9 minus 12, which is negative 3. And once again, I'm just going to work vertically. I'm going to bring that plus 5 down. And now I do the addition. Negative 3 plus 5 is 2, and that's my final answer. All right, now when we look at this problem, once again, we have a division problem inside of our grouping symbol here, and we have multiplication here. So we look inside of this, we need to take care of this division guy. All right, so 15 divided by negative 3, all right, is negative 5. Now, notice I'm keeping this in parentheses, all right, and bringing the 4 down in parentheses as well, because what we should know, all right, and become familiar with is that when two things are in parentheses or right next to each other, it's implied multiplication. All right, so sometimes what happens is if we forget to bring those parentheses down, we end up doing addition or subtraction sometimes, depending on what numbers we have, all right, because we don't have the right organization. And so I have a negative times a positive here, so that's a negative number, and then 5 times 4 is 20. And then that's all you have. All right, so let's look at one other type of problem before you run off and do some on your own here. All right, now, so notice here that sometimes grouping symbols are implied. And what I mean by that is if we look, we have a division problem here. All right, so this bar means division. We want to do 24 divided by some number here. Now, technically what's happening here is this is really 24 over 3 minus 11 in parentheses. All right, so, but a lot of times, because it's in the denominator, it's already separated from the rest of the problem, you will not see those parentheses. But it's kind of implied that we have to do the subtraction here before we can do the division, which seems to go against our order of operations when we talk about the progression. And the reason is because, once again, those grouping symbols are implied here. So notice I want to do 24 divided by something, so I've got to do that operation in the denominator. So 3 minus 11 is negative 8. All right, and now notice I have a regular division problem. I can do a positive divided by a negative, that's a negative number. 24 divided by 8 is 3. So when you're dealing with a fraction like this, a division problem like this, just know that it could happen in the numerator as well, that grouping symbol is implied. So you want to always simplify the numerator and the denominator basically as a separate problem. Follow the order of operations in the numerator to get to one number, follow the order of operations in the denominator, get to one number, and then you can do the division problem. All right, so what I'm going to do now is give you 4 problems. I'd like you to work these on your own. All right, so go ahead and pause the video. All right, work through these, show all your work, and then we'll check them and see how you did. All right, so what I'm going to do now is flip to the answer slide, and we're going to look at the first 2 guys first. All right, and I have everything here for you so you can see kind of the work I would like to see from you, all right, and kind of compare that to what you have. So notice we have to do the division first here, which gives us the 2. Keep the sign here. Notice everything is coming down nice and neat. 7 minus 2 is 5. Now notice we have all multiplication here, so I'm just going to do multiplication from right to left, or excuse me, from left to right. So 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Negative 6 times 5 is negative 30. All right, so let's look at the final 2 guys here. All right, so notice we had to do our exponent here. Now, once again, remember that negative 2 to the 3rd power is negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. All right, and so when you do that, you should get negative 8. A very common mistake here is that a lot of students will put negative 6 here. They'll just forget what that exponent means. They'll do negative 2 times 3. Very common error. And then notice here we have our multiplication problem, and you should end up with negative 24. All right, so here's once again an example of that rational problem, that division problem. We need to simplify the numerator and get a number here before we can divide by 5. So we simply do 40 minus 25, which is 15, and then 15 divided by 5 is 3. All right, so that wraps up our first lesson on order of operations. All right, so go ahead and try the self-assessment questions. Give the homework a shot, and then let me know if you have any questions.